Welcome back to Edge of Indy. If you have not come across Edge of Indy before, welcome to the show. Tell you a little bit about what we're doing here in Indianapolis. We're talking about everything local that goes on in Indianapolis. We're talking about marketing, new ideas, trends in technology, as well as innovators here in Indianapolis, and who's moving and shaking. What great business growth is happening in Indy, creative agencies, charities as well. So we're trying to get a handle on what's happening here in Indy, and also invite you to choose local. That's the entire point of this show, is to be able to give some exposure to some local companies that are also looking to give back regularly to their community. So welcome back to Edge of Indy. That's what we're all about. So I'd like to introduce to you Michael Pearson, head brewer and co-founder of Daredevil Brewing. Michael, thanks for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. More than welcome. Thank you for bringing the beer.
You're welcome. One thing a brewer can do is show up with beer.
Best this table has ever looked.
I'm saying.
Yeah. And also the most productive this table has ever been. Yeah.
Well, we've got a lot to even talk about and drink. And boy, Nate just
I know. I knew you were going to say it, so I wanted to jump in ahead of time and make sure that
you have some sort of drinking game going on in your head that I don't know about.
Always.
It's like the word "the" or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what happens when I show up to work.
Well, I mean, there's a few race day inspired local beers these days, right? And other than the race itself, what inspired you to make this beer, the Race Day Lager?
Well, Race Day Lager is a beer that, honestly, I brewed it originally to keep people from drinking my personal stash of German Pilsner. I was doing a lot of pilot brewing, and the thing with German lagers, particularly when you use traditional methods, they take longer to brew.
Okay.
And a lot of American brewing styles or British styles are things that you can turn around in 2 to 3 weeks in some cases. Whereas German techniques and ingredients really require more of a 6 to 8 week process. So I needed a way to fend off all the people that kept drinking my Kolsch and my Pilsner. And so I started messing around with what eventually became Race Day American Lager, which is unusual in its creation in that it's nearly an all malt craft lager. Mm-hmm. So it is a flavorful yet crisp, dry, refreshing interpretation of a style of beer that almost everybody thinks they know. And we wanted to put our twist on it and higher quality techniques that are common to Daredevil Brewing.
Oh, fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit about the background of Daredevil Brewing, if you would.
Well, Daredevil is a production brewing facility in Speedway. Mm-hmm. That's where people know us now. We originally started in rural Shelby County, where myself, my twin brother, and my best friend Bill took a 3,000 square foot pole barn and turned it into our original production facility. We were all working full time and starting Daredevil. And from there, we launched the company with one beer, which was unheard of at the time. But that was Liftoff IPA, okay, which is what most people know us for. But as time goes on and we continue to grow, we're expanding into other types of beer that I enjoy brewing and that I have a lot of experience brewing. And that's where things like Race Day Lager and other lagers that we're starting to brew and distribute are becoming more common and something that Daredevil's known for.
Well, you shared with me a bit of your background, your personal background and career, and give me the idea of it's fantastic that you're working with your family as well as your best friend, but give me an insight into the convergence of skills that you have that you brought to brewing.
For me, brewing is it's a direct extension of things I've always enjoyed doing. I've been somebody that likes to tinker. I grew up on a farm. That taught me hard work. That gave me a work ethic that I don't know I could have gotten anywhere else from my father and grandfather.
Sure.
And from there, I just learned to fix things and think about things. And the nature of farming and the nature of brewing are very connected in that there's a seasonality to it. There's a connection to the raw materials that become food, beverage, your life, basically, your sustenance. And that was a formative way to grow up. And I enjoyed school. Always enjoyed math and science. I knew I wanted to be an engineer when I was a very young child, and went to Purdue, learned a lot. Didn't learn enough to be an engineer, but learned enough to get a degree.
It's okay. It happens to the best of us.
Well, but engineering and brewing are similar in that way too, in that you can't come out of school with enough to be good. You can come out of school with enough that somebody can identify you as trainable.
Right.
And I was fortunate to be able to go to work for a smaller American-owned controls company for the first 4 years of my career. Worked with two really good mid-career engineers that taught me how to mentor, taught me how to really learn in the field. And
So you had a good foundation, but that foundation is not nearly enough to make a career out of that. And you've had some great mentors that gave you that type of additional work ethic guidance as well.
yes, absolutely.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And it was about 15 years into my engineering career that I started to really get serious about brewing as a possible future. And honestly, it was out of boredom. I was working for a large pharmaceutical company here in Indianapolis. I had moved back to Indy in 2002. I'd been a consulting engineer for a number of years and was traveling a lot, and just was at a point in my life I wanted something else. And Indianapolis was starting to become the Indy that we all know now. It just was a little bit different.
Yep.
But you could see the foundation. I'd lived in Denver and Kansas City and seen similar transformations in their infancy. And I was excited about coming back to Indy and being part of what I thought would be a similar, I don't want to say resurrection of the downtown, but, transformation.
Pretty darn close.
So I think I got back here at a good time.
Yeah.
And so the pace of my work was slower than I was used to. So I started homebrewing to continue to really stay interested in things like fermentation science. And there's other parts of brewing that are technical from a lab perspective. It was just a way for me to occupy my intellectual interests.
Well, if you're going to have a hobby, it might as well be brewing, right?
It might as well.
I homebrew. I can back that up.
And from there, things just kind of, and there's things sort of just rolled from there. I became pretty good at homebrewing. I had professional brewers seeking me out for advice.
Cool.
I was doing just pro bono consulting for recipe creation, sensory evaluation, just engineering stuff.
Yep.
Whether it be process or instruments or equipment related. And in 2008 and 11, I was the Indiana Home Brewer of the Year. Which
Oh, wow.
It's kind of fun to think about because that was a long time ago.
Yeah,
Caleb, does that make you feel inadequate?
absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
He counters with his beard.
Yeah. But it was for me, I got into beer judging, and those competitions weren't about winning things. They were more about getting blind feedback.
Yeah.
Huh.
And
Almost got a focus group right there kind of thing.
yeah, it's like a free focus group
There you
almost. Yeah.
And you're making people happy.
And you're making people happy.
That's awesome, and that's a great story. Just to be mindful of. You can certainly turn hobbies into a lucrative career, right?
I don't know about
Lucrative. Well, yeah, I mean, you're getting compensated in one way, shape, or form. You're bringing
Right,
happiness to the masses.
It's rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I tell people is that brewing is a lifestyle choice. It's not the type of career, regardless of the one-off headlines where people are getting paid out.
Right.
Those are really unusual and special circumstances. Most people who brew beer or prepare food for a living do it out of love.
Absolutely. No, I've known in my previous lives, I've been a bartender and a waiter in different food and beverage, and I mean the people that actually have the mom and pop restaurants, and we interviewed a bunch of them on the Yelp show. They love what they do.
Absolutely.
And with the amount of work and care that they put into it and the struggles that they have, right? You have to love it.
You have to.
So I mean, this is in the same vein. Is that it's a passion. It's an art form as well, and you've got to take it seriously, but you got to love what you're doing, right?
At the end of the day, you've got to be able to go home, get some sleep, and wake up the next morning and be just as excited as you were the day before.
But in the middle,
Yeah.
you can actually drink what you've created.
That is true. Yeah.
Usually it's at the end of the day, and that's why we call it a shift beer.
Okay, so
But you get to decide when your own shifts are.
Okay,
technically,
I
right?
think we're actually at the end of our shift right now. So we're going to crack open one of these guys. Okay.
You're behind.
I am behind. But I wanted to do it with Michael, you say. So
That's fine.
The race day lager, okay. How's this moving from just production, the production facility in Shelbyville, to having a tap room in Speedway? I mean, that was a big jump.
It was a very big jump, and for us, it's always humbling to talk about the Speedway experience because of all the things that we went through before we chose Speedway.
Oh, that's really good.
And the sometimes you just talk about like there's synergies that fall into your lap, and you know you've got this branding that looks like it was made for Speedway and our corporate logo and a lot of our branding.
Yeah.
But the the end result is just we get an opportunity to be part of something that's bigger than us, and that's really what I think about every time I think about we're in Speedway. As far as the beer goes, race day it's really two things. We talked a little bit about why.
Yep.
But one of the fun parts about this beer is it also allowed me to come up with a nice link with one of our local restaurants, the Tamale Place. So the Tamale Place processes a lot of corn. And as you can imagine, those half-pound tamales go through many 50-pound bags of corn, and they make their own masa. And
Oh my Lord.
the little hint of corn that's in this beer comes from the Tamale Place. So I work with them to get several hundred pounds of masa that we turn into a slurry. And through all the times when I was testing this recipe, the one thing that I learned was people don't necessarily want to taste corn, but if there wasn't this hint of it, it's just like your mind didn't engage, and you weren't thinking about all these memories, positive memories that you'd had about drinking some type of American lager.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to me how there's this little, 0.5% of corn in the recipe, but without it, it's just people don't engage the beer quite the same.
I am very appreciative of you sitting on stage there because I can taste it. I don't know if my mind's diving into it. I can really taste that. So what the motivation of choosing Speedway for the tap room? Obviously, there's a great growth in Speedway, and there's a resurgence of the racing community and the entire community, by and large, there. So, what was the direct motivation of getting out there as opposed to different areas of growth here in the city?
Well, when we looked at sites, and we went through about a 9-month process to try to find the future home of Daredevil Brewing. And the thing that we originally were hoping to do was to find a way to purchase the Allison 1 building, which is roughly 1200 Main Street. It's a wonderful structure, but it's not for sale. But it's one of those things where we at least attempted to contact the owner and see if there was a way we could acquire part of it or lease it. And because there's a lot of history with breweries renovating buildings in cities or towns that are looking to bring new growth opportunities. Because in the case of a destination brewery, it becomes it becomes a tourist attraction, becomes a reason for people to visit.
Yep.
After that initial investigation, we became aware of a large 22-acre part of the east side of Main Street that was going to basically go up for sale. Speedway Redevelopment Commission had put a lot of effort into this former GM facility. It had been cleared, the land had been cleaned up.
Oh, wow. Right on Main Street.
Right on Main Street,
That's
basically between Dolera and 10th Street.
Yeah, we all went there last year.
That was all,
we did.
that was
Without
all
you.
open. And they had initially tried to bid it to a single developer. They weren't able to fulfill the sale that way.
Right.
So there was a plan to break up and sell parcels. And that's when we got our introduction to the Speedway Redevelopment Commission. And it became quite obvious to both sides very quickly that we had we had similar goals.
Mm-hmm.
They were looking to transform Main Street. We were looking to be part of a community that we could be an anchor in and help with those types of
Oh,
transformations.
very cool.
And we very quickly worked out the details of a development agreement and waited months for the lawyers to dot the I's and cross the T's as they need to. And about 8 months later, began construction on what is now Daredevil Brewing Company in Speedway.
Very cool.
So I have a question for you that just out of curiosity, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about off camera about, you know, the competitiveness in the space now and the number of craft breweries that are coming out. So in the space that we tend to work here at Site Strategics, you know, obviously we do marketing to try and help people gain a competitive advantage and things of that nature. Within the brewing community, what are some of the differentiators that would give Daredevil or anybody else a competitive advantage over a neighbor or some other of these craft breweries that are coming up around town? And, you know, especially within Indianapolis, I mean, we've got a dozen, 24 craft breweries that are around now that people can get to. So what gives you guys, or what could potentially give you guys or somebody else that's thinking about starting a brewery, that competitive advantage and that competitive edge?
Well, I think with anything that's a product that's being created, first off is I think you actually better be good at brewing, and let's assume that you've got the ability to make really good beer. The next thing is about 90% of success is going to come from whether or not you can run a business, that you can put together a solid plan. And one of the most challenging things is if you decide to run a brew pub or a tap room. That's a very different business model than saying I'd like to be, you know, one of the larger production breweries and ship beer. Shipping beer, you know, an analogy that I'll use is brewing beer that you're going to sell in a growler, and basically all the beer's gone in 30 days or less. You know, that's basically like a tricycle. Brewing beer, putting it in a can or keg, shipping it to market all over your own state. Now we're getting a lot closer to like an Indy car. I mean, there's a lot that could go wrong, and you've got to be able to have very good control of your entire process, every process step. The beer could be great, but if you don't package it correctly, it's not going to make your consumer happy. You're going to have, you're just not going to have repeat customers. So you always got to come to the table with the idea of I've got one chance at convincing somebody that they should take a second drink. I mean, if they're not going to take a second drink, they're certainly not going to open the second can.
You wouldn't have that problem with Nate or myself for that matter.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you know,
Let's just get this out of the way then.
to your point, I mean, we're at a time and a place where consumers are, you know, much more discerning with their palates, and so, like you said, I mean, the product has to be good, or you're destined to fail. And even, you know, and also off camera, we were kind of talking about your branding too. And I you know, this is a consumer's assumption, but, you know, maybe you could add a little bit to that. But I feel like with, you know, the competitive nature of the industry right now, it's important to have, you know, really solid branding because of that limited shelf space that, you know, you're looking at, because there are only so many shelves in stores. But as breweries grow, I mean, you know, how do you get in there, and how do you advertise your product?
No, I agree. Branding's extremely important. So we'll kind of get a list going here. Make good beer.
Right.
Understand that you have to be able to run a business as effectively as you need to be able to brew good beer. You need branding, and not only does branding, I think, become so important because it's a visual connection. There's people buy differently. Some people buy purely on visuals. Some people want information. So the language that you use on your in your branding or on your products really matters.
Yeah.
And I always look at it as there's a bunch of great branding and marketing books out there, and I always fall into this kind of simple discussion of what we're trying to do is to market to our tribe. they're all out there. And if we understand what it is we're making and why we're making it, so I think the story behind the beer matters too. And the better our branding communicates who we are and why we matter, the easier it is for our tribe to find our beer. And we don't have to be everybody's favorite beer. We certainly aren't going to make every kind of beer out there.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to do is make sure that the beers we put in front of people have a story and that they matter.
But I will give you props on, you have done a lot of different styles, and I mean, I've had most of them. Lift Off.
Now I feel way less bad about Aaron's comment.
But Lift Off is, one of, if not the best local IPAs. I love JWP, your stout. Carnival is a fantastic saison,
and it's one of the most recognizable too. I
Yeah.
mean,
Bring
you
your
guys
stout
have done. You guys have done.
Is the stout here?
I do
No.
not bring any of this stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just like the branding and that visual is one of the things that sticks into my head whenever I think of Daredevil is of the Liftoff IPA too.
Yeah.
And that's one of those, every beer's got a story behind it. And for me, Liftoff, it's our first beer. And we get asked questions all the time about, like, how do you name the company or why did you do this? And then, of course, names. How did you come up with that name? Well, naming stuff's hard these days.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people naming beers, and we went through a lot of different lists, and we talked about what does Daredevil mean. And my whole thing with the first beer was I wanted the name to be action oriented, and I wanted it to somehow convey all of the challenges of opening a brewery. And when I was working through these endless lists trying to come up with something that we could use because it hadn't been used by anybody else, eventually it got into just rocketeering. And it's not a really big stretch. You start to go, okay, I'm doing my countdown. I'm literally looking at like the NASA list of, how does this go down and what are the different words that are used. And I remember getting to ignition, and that one was used by somebody. But
It's R. Kelly, actually. But
and then I thought, well, Liftoff. Well, that's interesting. Because one of the things about starting a new business is everybody thinks about the ignition moment as, oh, you opened. But the ignition happened way down the line. And what they're really seeing is the first visible sign of the energy the partners put into the business. So Liftoff seemed like a pretty good name to connect to our passion.
Yeah.
And
we're bonding right now with all of this. Have you
Yeah,
seen our?
he didn't know this, but yeah.
Yeah, the Site Strategics logo is a rocket. We've named a lot of our marketing tiers and platforms and stuff off of.
Don't steal my names.
Well, I feel like we have something here that we
we are
need
looking
to be
for
together.
the official beer sponsor of Site Strategics.
Of Site Strategics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seems like a natural.
And I also at the tap room, I love the Liftoff guy. And does the Liftoff guy have a name?
Well, he's Flying Man.
Oh,
so
okay.
that's based on the Da Vinci artwork.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
It's
yep,
originated
absolutely.
from.
So I love the flying man that's hanging from the ceiling in the tap room. That is so cool.
Yeah, that one, that's my brother's thing.
Yeah.
So he does these little marketing projects. And as it turns out, our branding company, which is a cultivator out of Denver, Colorado, they do a lot of work for a company that builds all kinds of stuff for Lucasfilms. And they were in once and saw all of our branding and said, we love this. Who are these guys? And as it turned out, they had this project to make the Flying Man, and they were like, we'll do it for whatever budget they have. We don't care.
Right, yeah.
Otherwise, there's no way.
But I bet Cultivator doesn't have a rocket ship for a logo, though.
Yeah, that's true.
No, they don't.
I'm just saying. Now, as we're live, we certainly want to ask for any comments or questions at the live feed. So we'll be able to put the comments up on the screen. So feel free to ask some questions of Michael, as well as Nate or Caleb here.
But don't ask questions to Aaron.
No, I'll field no questions.
Nope.
So, Michael, you're hosting the Hops and Flip Flops Festival again this year. Can you tell us about that and some other festivals that you're attending?
Well, for us, Hops and Flip Flops is our primary philanthropic event. It's not just a festival. What we've used Hops and Flip Flops for is a way to bring awareness to speedway trails, and that's the primary benefactor of the festival. So what we're working with Speedway Trails to do is to really just revitalize their trail system and eventually connect it to the White River Trail system and make it a more integrated part of Indianapolis.
Oh, cool.
A lot of people forget that Speedway is only about 4 miles from downtown, but just due to the nature of the streets between there and here,
Right.
biking or bike access to downtown from Speedway is more limited than we think it should be.
Yep.
And a lot of people in Speedway would like to bike back and forth to downtown too.
No, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
And actually, on the topic of biking, I saw that, again, this year you're doing the Bike to the 500, or you're hosting that. How many years has that been going on, and have you seen some good growth of that?
Well,
because I think it's a great idea. It's it's a safe way to get in and out, and efficient way, because I've been in the traffic trying to get to the race on race day.
It's IndyCog does a lot of the real footwork behind it. We provide them a space to park all those bikes. Last year was the first year because it was the first year that we were open for the race. This year, from what I've seen, it looks like it's growing a lot. I don't have a final number projected for that, but we definitely saw a lot of people enjoy that opportunity to bike to the race and back. And we're looking for that event to grow over time.
Oh, very good. Well, pardon me. Well, aside from your own tap room and beers, what are some other favorite spots that you actually may have around Indy? Because you're certainly plugged in, and you're certainly focusing on Indianapolis growth. This, with your partnership with Speedway, I mean, there's got to be some like-minded individuals such as yourself that you've come to know that are business owners around town. Give a spotlight on some of these that are out there. Maybe even some favorite local breweries that you have.
Oh man! So I lived in downtown Indy for a number of years. I just moved to Speedway because it was easier for me. So I live about 4 blocks from the brewery now. But when I lived
a hell of a commute that is.
Yeah. I think we call that stumbling distance. That's what we call that.
Depends how many shift beers you have, I guess.
one shift a day, no matter how long it is.
Yeah.
Only one shift.
Yeah.
But when I lived downtown, I lived near Mass Ave. So I always found it interesting, the places people talked about who weren't from that area.
Right.
And it's changed a lot. I mean, there's so many more great restaurants to go to. But some of the locals are still great locals, whether they be like the Mass Ave Pub, for example.
Sure.
It's a lot of people go to. But I remember when, so one of the places that opened that really started to change Mass Ave, I thought at the time, was Black Market. At the very end, there was nothing down there. It's like, how is that place going to survive? Well, they made really great food. That's how. And I think the team at Black Market really started some great things. And since then, they've opened other places. It's the same ownership of places like, Siam Square was first, I believe, before Black Market, but I don't remember exactly. But they also own Rook, so there's some really good places that they've opened. And I just think that anymore, I'll be honest, I mean, I'm just as happy getting a Shapiro's sandwich as anything else in the downtown. That's probably my...
They got the meats, don't they?
Yeah.
Oh, my Lord.
I'm a big fan. If I could only eat at one place, it might be Shapiro's. I barbecue a lot, so I have a lot of respect for their really homemade, amazing deli quality.
I've not had their brisket yet. I got to check that out. But their Reuben is fantastic. Their corned beef is out of this world.
Corned beef, pastrami.
Yep, absolutely. So, I mean, kind of pulling it back to Speedway, because I really think there's a big opportunity to be able to do some outreach to Speedway. And then obviously this is the race, and we want to give some focus and some props to what the Speedway revitalization group is doing out there. What else are they doing with different organizations out there to be able to help the growth in Speedway?
Well, I'm the brewer, not the marketing guy. So my
Sure.
twin brother would have really good answers for some of these questions.
Well, if your twin brother's watching, he needs to comment on the
yeah,
know,
he
right?
should. He
Come
should
in.
get on the feed and he can chime in. But what I see as a business owner is that Speedway and the Redevelopment Commission continue to invest in infrastructure that makes being a business there easier.
Mm-hmm.
They do a lot to promote beyond just the race. So, when I think about the Speedway that I know today versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago, what I've seen them do is bring in a lot of new businesses. When we opened the brewery, there were 3 restaurants on Main Street. There are 8 now,
Mm-hmm.
with more coming. There's a mixed retail hotel apartment complex that's going to be built on the corner next to the roundabout. There's been a lot of revitalization and construction on the exit at Crawfordsville Road and 465. So you can see them engaging in different ways at the very local level, Main Street, and then at the corridor level at the highway. And they're putting a lot more focus on Crawfordsville Road as Main Street has kind of gotten enough inertia that it's going in a direction that seems to be stable at this point. And then I think once we get full connection of the trail system, which actually the trailhead's at our brewery, so that's just another kind of piece of synergy that like we're at the beginning and ending of the trailhead.
That's awesome, actually. Get at the end of that trail, and there's Daredevil right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just need a rainbow over the top.
Well, that's fantastic. You got to give a shout out to them. Michael, to wrap up, are there any words of wisdom, for lack of a better expression, that you would give craft brewers that are trying to break through? And I mean, it's from hobby, and I mean, it starts with passion. There's obviously the hobbyists, and there's that next level, right, where they're trying to break through and actually create that business. And there's a lot of strugglers that are trying to do what you've done, let alone just keep a business going, but be able to get it to market. What would you give them as a word of advice of how to do it or what to avoid?
Well, I think the big thing is to try and do everything you can to get experience. The more experience, the better. Before you really think about, I'm going to start a brewery, think about all the steps to become what part of that brewery you intend to be. Are you going to be the brewer at that brewery? Are you going to be the manager of the brewery? What's your part of it? Once you figure out what your part is, I would say do everything you can to become the expert at that part, and then surround yourself with people who can fill in the other pieces. But the more experience that you can get, the better, whether it be through I would always say formal education and hands-on have to be parts of your repertoire. You can't theoretically make beer, and it's really hard to brew beer without a technical background so that you can understand what the goal is. I mean, if you can't see the dartboard you're about to throw a dart at,
you could get lucky.
You could get lucky, but can you repeat it? That's what you see a lot of times is the grind of this business is that you are expected to be perfect, and you need to have that mindset of there is no compromise. It was almost a good batch,
right?
And that takes a lot of preparation up front to execute on a regular basis.
All right, a bonus question. Whenever you're dealing, I mean,
is it from Caleb?
No,
oh.
but I'm channeling Caleb here.
Oh, okay.
Because there's a
I know he had.
there's a he's actually right here, so that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I don't know why you do whatever you got to do.
The consumer is very what do I want to say oriented towards craft beer now, and their tastes are certainly differentiated by all the different stratification of beer that's out there, the brewers that are out there. What type of engagement do you have with those consumers? I heard Seth Godin whenever you were talking tribes here for a second, but whenever it comes down to connection to the consumers, because there's so many brands out there, right? And it's just a saturation. That brand loyalty is something that you obviously understand. So does your brother. Be able to connect to your consumers and be able to champion them, right? What do you do to help engage with your consumers and your brand loyalists to really be able to get feedback and on top of that, get them to champion you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that we've always had a focus on is social media. It is the easiest way in the modern era to communicate quickly with people and get feedback. So Shane does a great job with all of our social media feeds are very interactive. His background is software, and he's got a lot more marketing experience than I have. And I think that this is part of that. Know what part of the brewery you're going to be an expert in.
Absolutely.
He's taking care of that part really well. So I think that it's not enough to brew beer that people want to drink. That's what we'd all like to do. But at the end of the day, this is a business that requires people to spend money on beer, and you'd like them to buy beer. We'd like them to come out to our tap room. We want them to come out and spend time with us. Yep. I spend a lot of time in the tap room talking with guests, educating them about beer, talking to them about why our beers taste the way they do, why they smell the way they do. German beer in particular has a very distinctive set of sensory characteristics, and if you spend time with Germans, and I have a lot of German heritage, I have German family, they almost always start by smelling their beer before they drink it. And that's just one of those things. But I really like the opportunity to have consistency across what's it like to be at Daredevil Brewery, what's it like to buy Daredevil Brewery, what's it like to interact with Daredevil Brewery in social media. And we should always be giving a consistent, high-quality experience to everybody. And, our tagline is aggressively fun. So, at the end of the day, we really want to be part of people's best moments. Some of the best moments we all can talk about in our lives, there may have been a beer involved in it or a beverage of some type. And we would just like to be in their mind when they're thinking about that beer they're going to pair with one of their favorite moments.
Like the race.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like a great race day.
Like a great race day. Where can people get race day? Can they just get it at your regular old liquor store around Indy, or do you have a specific distributor or provider, Crown or Payless or anybody like that?
Race day.
Or only at Daredevil?
No, Race Day Craft Lagers, for the first time, was distributed throughout Indiana.
Awesome.
So we began distribution in mid-April to all major package stores. Some groceries are carrying it, although that wasn't a focus this year. We're distributed by Monarch World Class Beer in central and southern Indiana, and Indiana Beverage in northern Indiana. It should be hard not to find Race Day Lager at any major package store and some grocery.
Well, yeah, I mean, all things considered, you better have a race day in your hands on race day, right?
And you can always come to the brewery.
That is true.
We sell cans, growlers, and crawlers.
Getting a road trip thought here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, check out...
Right now?
Like, right now. Okay. We're going home with you, Michael.
Yep.
So check out all of the products. And quickly, Michael, just give us a showcase of these products and their flavors. What we got here?
Well, we've got Liftoff IPA, which is our flagship, and the beer most people know us for. Our Vacation Kolsch, which is our GABF Silver Medal Kolsch. It's probably the beer that we sell second most right now, and also just one we've distributed it long enough. A lot of people know us for that beer.
Cool.
We've got the Race Day Lager that we've been speaking about quite a bit, and then this year marks the first year that we're distributing lager beer throughout Indiana, and the next beer that we'll begin distribution of in June is our German-style Pilsner, which is the blue can on the left.
Oh boy! Well, we're going to have to do some samplings here after the show. Here, I'm just warning everybody.
Sweet, I'm in.
Yep.
All right. So you can reach Daredevil at their social media spaces on Twitter at Daredevil Beer, Facebook, Facebook.com, obviously, Daredevil Beer, Instagram, Daredevil Beer. I'm tripping over that. Daredevil got me here. And the website, daredevilbeer.com. That's fantastic that you were able to pick them all up with that. as opposed to having to hyphenate anything. So fantastic. You reach out to them socially. This is a brand, guys, that is fantastic for their social media connections, and they truly do get the consumer connection and the tribal side of this, right? Because that's what you're talking about whenever you're talking about craft beers is finding your tribe and be able to listen as well as let them know what's going on, right?
Find those beer nerds.
Find those beer nerds. All right. Michael, any final words for you?
Oh, I just want to thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Hope
Thanks
you
for
guys
coming.
get a chance to enjoy some track time here in the next week.
I don't know if we will. We'll probably stop by Daredevil and just stay there.
That might be true.
Please do.
Yep.